There's a truth nobody really says out loud. We live in a world that's quietly taught us that nothing is ever quite enough. Achievements that should feel rewarding now feel muted. Comparisons we barely notice end up shifting our sense of what's normal. And the constant push for more leaves us feeling like we're never quite there. It's not that we're broken or ungrateful. It's that we've been conditioned to live on an emotional treadmill. And now it's time to step back, strip away the noise, and see the pattern for what it really is. Welcome to the Glitch Cult, where we peel back the layers of your reality and expose the hidden patterns you've been trained to ignore. Let's start with something uncomfortable but honest. Most people aren't unhappy in a dramatic way. They're not in constant pain. They're not collapsing. They're functioning. And that's exactly the problem. Because what many people are living with today isn't sadness, it's a flatness. A dull, quiet emotional plateau where nothing really hits the way that it used to. You achieve something you work toward. You finish a project. You hit a milestone. Maybe you even get what you once wanted badly. And for a moment, you feel a brief sense of relief. And then it disappears. Not because the achievement was meaningless, but because your internal scale for what counts as meaningful has quietly shifted. This is what people don't talk about. Your emotional response system doesn't stay neutral over time. It adjusts. It recalibrates based on what you repeatedly experience. When your life is filled with constant stimulation, constant novelty, constant exposure to what others are doing, what others have, what others are achieving, your internal baseline slowly rises. Without asking it, without announcing itself. So now, normal progress feels underwhelming. Steady effort feels slow. Small wins feel insignificant. Not because they are, but because your reference point has moved far away from where you're standing. And most dangerous part is that this flatness feels normal. You don't wake up thinking something is wrong. You just feel less present, less impressed, less moved. Life doesn't feel terrible. It just doesn't feel sharp anymore. People mistake this for maturity. They say things like, I guess I've grown up, or I don't get excited like I used to. But that's not wisdom. That's desensitization. And there's a difference. When everything around you is optimized to grab attention, to exaggerate outcomes, to compress time and effort into highlights, your nervous system learns one thing very clearly. Ordinary moments don't deserve much response. And that lesson doesn't stay confined to entertainment. It leaks into your work, your goals, your relationships, even your sense of self. You start thinking you're the problem, that maybe you're ungrateful, lazy, broken, but the truth is quieter and more unsettling. You've been trained to expect intensity, not depth, peaks, not process. And when real life doesn't match that intensity, it feels empty, even when it's objectively fine. This is the emotional flatline, not despair, not depression, just a constant low-level numbness that convinces you that something is missing without telling you what it is. And unless you slow down enough to notice it, you'll keep chasing stronger stimuli, bigger goals, louder distractions, thinking that the next thing will finally make you feel something again. Let's talk about comparison now, but not the obvious kind. Not jealousy, not consciously wanting someone else's life. What I'm talking about is more subtle and far more damaging. You're constantly exposed to other people's outcomes, their progress, their upgrades, their highlights. And even if you tell yourself you don't care, even if you think you're immune, your mind is still absorbing one message over and over again. This is the standard. Not the effort behind it, not the context, not the full story, just the result. And over time, that changes how you measure your own life. You stop measuring progress by how far you've come. You start measuring it by where you stand relative to others. And that shift happens quietly. No decision required. So now, progress doesn't feel like progress unless it's impressive. Improvement doesn't feel valuable unless it's visible. Consistency feels pointless because it doesn't create immediate contrast. And the worst part is that you don't even realize why your motivation is eroding. You just feel less satisfied with everything you do. This is how people end up surrounded by evidence of success and still feel behind. Because when your reference point is external and constantly moving, there is no finish line. There is no moment of enough. There's only the feeling of being slightly late, slightly slower, slightly less than whatever you just saw. And this doesn't just affect ambition, it affects identity. You start questioning whether what you're doing even matters, whether your pace is acceptable, whether your life is big enough to justify your effort. The comparison trap doesn't scream at you, it whispers. It shows you 1,000 small examples of what life could look like, and slowly convinces you that your current experience is inadequate by default. So even rest feels unearned. Even contentment feels like complacency. And instead of asking whether the standard itself makes sense, people turn the pressure inward. They push harder, consume more, chase faster results, all while feeling increasingly disconnected from why they started in the first place. This is how comparison turns into quiet self-rejection. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a constant sense that whatever you're doing isn't quite enough, and neither are you. When nothing feels enough, the most natural response is to look for more. More goals, more stimulation, more change, more intensity. And on the surface, this looks like ambition. It looks like drive. It looks like wanting growth. But very often, it's not growth at all. It's compensation. Because when your internal sense of satisfaction has been dulled, more becomes a way to feel something again. Not fulfillment, just movement, just momentum, just proof that you're not standing still. So people stack goals instead of finishing them. They upgrade plans instead of committing to one. They chase novelty instead of depth. And every time something starts to slow down or lose its emotional charge, they interpret that as a sign to move on. What they don't realize is that depth doesn't shout. It doesn't spike. It doesn't constantly reassure you. It requires staying with something long enough for it to matter. And in a world trained on constant stimulation, staying feels unbearable. So people confuse boredom with failure, calm with emptiness, stability with stagnation. And they keep escalating their expectations, thinking the problem is a lack of intensity, when the real issue is a lack of presence. This is the illusion of more. The belief that the next thing will finally resolve the quiet dissatisfaction you can't quite name. And every time it doesn't, the dissatisfaction deepens because now you also feel disappointed with yourself for still feeling this way. Let me be clear about one thing. Nothing is wrong with you for feeling this. You're not unmotivated. You're not broken. You're not incapable of appreciating life. But you're living inside a system that constantly raises the bar for what counts as meaningful, while giving you less and less space to actually feel anything deeply. And until you see that clearly, calmly, without judgment, nothing will ever feel enough. Not because your life lacks value, but because your perception of value has been quietly reshaped. That's the truth most people avoid. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So remember, it's not about fixing yourself. It's about seeing the system that taught you to feel incomplete. And once you see it, you're free to redefine what enough really means for you.